Emily stepped into the apartment. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight. The air felt heavy. Still, she shivered, though the day was warm. The apartment was old. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet. Shadows clung to the corners of the room. The landlord, a man with eyes like a startled owl, handed her the keys. "Good luck," he muttered, his voice raspy. He didn't linger. Emily watched him go, a feeling of unease settling in her stomach. The apartment was sparsely furnished. A single bed sat against the far wall of the bedroom. A wardrobe stood beside it, its dark wood dull and scratched. The only other piece of furniture was a vanity table. It stood opposite the bed, its surface covered in dust, and above it hung the mirror. The mirror was old, its silver backing tarnished with age. The glass was cloudy, distorted. Emily caught a glimpse of her reflection, or what she thought was her reflection. The image was wrong, stretched, the eyes too large and dark. She looked away, heart pounding. It was just the light, she told herself, the setting sun casting strange shadows. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to her. That night, Emily lay awake. The city noises, usually a comfort, seemed amplified, distorted. She could have sworn she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. A flicker in the darkness. She turned towards the vanity. The mirror seemed to gleam even in the darkness. The days that followed were filled with a growing sense of unease. Objects moved, whispers seemed to follow her. Emily tried to ignore it, to rationalize it away, but the mirror was always there, watching. One evening she caught her reflection again. This time there was no mistaking it. The face in the mirror was not her own. It was a woman's face, pale and gaunt, with eyes filled with a deep, unsettling sorrow. Emily stumbled back, a scream rising in her throat, but when she looked again, the image was gone, replaced by her own frightened reflection. Sleep became difficult. Nightmares plagued her. Visions of the woman in the mirror, her eyes pleading, filled her dreams. The whispers grew stronger, sometimes forming words Emily couldn't quite make out. She tried to cover the mirror. She draped a sheet over it, but the sheet kept slipping. She tried to move the vanity, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it were rooted to the spot. The mirror's presence grew stronger. It was as if it were seeping into her life, into her very being. One night, Emily woke with a start. The room was cold, the air thick with a cloying dread. The mirror seemed to pulse with a light of its own. The whispers were louder now, urging her closer. Hesitantly, Emily got out of bed. She felt drawn to the mirror, as if against her will. She reached out, her hand trembling, and pulled the sheet away. The mirror shone brightly. The woman stood within its depths. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, laced with a deep sadness. "Help me," she whispered. Emily recoiled from the mirror, fear gripping her heart, but it was too late. The mirror's light flared, blinding her. When Emily could see again, she was no longer in her room. She stood in a dark, desolate landscape. The air was cold, heavy with despair. The ground beneath her feet was barren, lifeless, and in the distance, shrouded in shadow, stood a towering figure. The woman from the mirror stood beside Emily. "He trapped me here," she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. "He feeds on fear, on despair." She looked at Emily, her eyes pleading. "You must stop him." Emily didn't understand. Who was this woman? Who was the figure in the distance, and how could she possibly stop him? She was just an ordinary girl trapped in a nightmare. But as she looked at the woman, at the despair in her eyes, Emily knew she couldn't just stand there. She had to do something. "How?" she asked, her voice trembling. The woman pointed towards the shadowy figure. "He feeds on fear," she repeated. "You must face him. You must show no fear." Taking a deep breath, Emily started towards the figure. The closer she got, the larger it seemed to grow. The air grew colder, the darkness more oppressive. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it down. She wouldn't let it control her. She reached the figure, and as she did, the darkness parted. The figure was gone. In its place stood the mirror, and reflected in its depths, Emily saw her own face, twisted in terror. And then she was gone. The apartment stood empty. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight. The mirror hung on the wall, its surface reflecting nothing but the empty room. But if one looked closely, very closely, they might see a flicker of movement in its depths. A whisper of darkness, waiting. The landlord rented the apartment again, a young man eager to start his new life in the city. He seemed nice enough, but the mirror was patient. It could wait.